Okay. Okay. It's day one. Day one of RPG a month, or RPG a day month. And I figured why not? Why not just talk about this stuff? Because it's hard to get like a thread of thoughts on Twitter in any kind of coherent way, and it just never works. And I thought it would actually be kind of interesting to just record stream of consciousness thoughts about whatever the topic is for that day, and see where it goes. And today's day one, so it's truly we're gonna just see how this works, and then I might do some design work after this. We might take like a brief break, and I might come back and talk about some Corvid Court stuff that I was brewing on after yesterday's stream, or even some season stuff. Hello, Dealer Umbra. Hello. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Oh boy, Roland's here. Excellent. Um, so yeah, I wanted to do something that wasn't is Clover around? She's not. She's not. Uh, no, it's a good thing that Roland. I only say that because um because you reminded me of all the Twitter drama that's going on, because you're a fierce advocate for stomping down on Nazis, and I appreciate that. And just that came to my mind. Clover is not around, so don't redeem any treat things. She is with Hadabaji, which is Korean for grandpa. Kate's dad is in town, and so he's her favorite person in the world, so she's more than happy to not be here right now. God, she loves grandpa so much. Okay, so scenario. That's the word. And I think scenario is interesting because you can kind of take it in a few different directions in terms of like how you interpret the word. I think the way I interpret it, and I think a lot of people are interpreting scenario, is in terms of a like a module or something that you like. It's a tool. It's something that you give to the group to use to play out the game. Um, when I hear the word scenario, or when I read the word scenario in terms of RPGs, the stuff that immediately comes to my mind is like pre-written stuff. And so I only like wrote one thing about this on Twitter, and it was basically the where I'm at right now as an RPG player, and by player I mean GM because I'm a forever GM, is I just make everything up. I just make all of it up every time. Um, that's actually why in Nova I didn't write all of the toolkit stuff in the GM section. I wrote the GM section with like advice on how to be a GM in Nova, but I did not write any of the stuff when it comes to enemies, like stat blocks, and the rules for coming up with ruins and generation, locations and missions, because um, I don't usually plan that stuff out in my own games, and so I I I was really struggling to write it. That's why I brought Jeremy Gage on to write it, and he did a fantastic job. So for me, scenario, exactly like Dealer Umbra says, is an interesting word, and it's one that I think I struggle with because I know as a designer I probably should be writing like a solid intro scenario or like mission or whatever in any game that I design. Uh, and there's one in Nova, and I wrote it and I sent it to Will, and they sent it back to me saying, "Hey, this is a good start, but like, don't you need X, Y, and Z for like this to be a mission?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just don't like writing those things." There are three in Slayers, that's true, and I wrote one of them. I wrote Lord of the Undead. The other two were written by Nevin Holmes and Banana Chan. Um, and theirs are really fucking cool. Theirs are good. I felt so bad because Nevin wrote like twice, like double the words in that are in the Slayer scenario that are that are actually in the book. He wrote so much cool stuff, and I really wish that I could have given them like the full opportunity to keep all of their words. Lord of the Undead is the easiest to run. That's true. I think I agree. There are more skeletons than most other systems. Yeah, that is true. They're skeletal, and that is one thing that I like about it. One thing that I hate about it, and I've talked about this in other things about Slayers, is that I really wrote it with this emphasis of like you should run it as a 3-act structure, which is like that made sense in my head when I was running Slayers initially and writing it, and now I think I wouldn't encourage that. I don't think I would encourage that at all. Um, and that all just kind of comes into the idea of like the difference between giving a map and like a skeletal framework, or not a map, a script and a skeletal framework. I think this is where my big issue with scenarios comes from. Because a lot of people think that scenarios are helpful for learning RPGs. And I get that mentality, right? Like, you're already learning new rules, probably, of some kind. So a scenario is one less thing that you cognitively have to be aware of it and think about. Um, but my hope is, or my assumption is, that like the rules can take up that cognitive load. It's the story, like the story and making up the scenario at the table. My hope is that it is easy and fun to do because you're playing that game because it captures the types of stories or genres or whatever that you want to tell stories about anyway. So I'm hoping that that isn't cognitively taxing. But again, that's a big hope of mine. That's not necessarily true. Alex likes the 3-act encouragement, though in my recent Slayer's hunts, I've deviated from it. Well, that's interesting. That's good to know that it was helpful early on, and then like you've sort of broken away from it. And I think that's something that again I kind of struggle with this is if you are learning a new system and you're given a like a really fleshed out adventure, like a really fleshed out scenario, I worry that if the GM sticks to the script and they expect the players to stick to the script, that you're teaching bad habits, right? That you are reinforcing certain expectations of a prescribed story, a prescribed scenario, a timeline of events that has to happen, and that like if players start to deviate from that, then like GMs need to like figure out how to encourage them to get back on that path because the scenario is written like this, and they're not playing the way that it's supposed to be written. Um, I think that's my big clash is that I think it reinforces it can. I have to say all of this is with like a big can. It's not a none of this is absolute. This is just my thoughts on all of this stuff. And it's also my like stream of consciousness. So I might say something and then like 3 minutes later go, actually that's totally wrong. So need to kind of reinforce that idea. Roland says, that's exactly what I got from Slayers. The game is so focused that it's easy to make up an adventure. That's an interesting point too, is that if a game is focused enough, if a game clearly lays on the table like this is what this is about, this is what you're supposed like this is what you do with this game, then having like a fully scripted scenario seems unnecessary. It feels I feel like that then will start to like clash with you because if you say it's a story, this game is about monster hunting in a cursed city, how you interpret that is going to be different than how I interpret it. And if I give you a specific scenario like that lays out all the things that the players are supposed to do, then I'm telling you what I mean by monster hunting in a cursed city, and I don't think that's helpful. It'd be weird to say It'd be weird for, say, Blades of the Dark to have published modules. That's interesting. Because there are some out there, right? They're not like full-on modules, right? But they're like premises of heists. Yeah, it's interesting. I have not. I read them. At least I read the ones that were like first made for the Kickstarter years ago when I was really into Blades. I never use any of them, but there's like a train robbery and something at like one of the universities. Yeah, so Dealer mentions something interesting here, which is the built-in starting scenario in Blades is that's interesting, right? Yeah, arbitrarily distinguishing between skeleton and fleshed out module. It's so tricky. Like that's why this word is hard to talk about because scenario is so well, I mean looking at all of these words are going to be incredibly vague for us to talk about eventually. I grabbed my books. I grabbed the games that I wrote in uh like printed form that I had easy access to, and Corvid Court has nothing in it. No scenarios in the printed book itself, and somebody complained about that. I do think there's a reason they put scenario. Yeah, I think so. It's like an interesting discussion. Uh, Seasons, I just put tables in. Like I said on Twitter, tables for me are like all I need. Somebody else complained about light, because in light all I did was list a bunch of like ideas for strikes, but not actually how to build one in the core game. And then I made and then I made an actual module for light that says here's how you build a scenario. Here's all the things that need to be in a scenario. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if I ran light, I don't think I'd use it. I don't think I'd use those rules. Um, I've read enough Kevin Crawford to have seen the glory. Yeah, there you go. You're gonna get plenty there. Score, which was my first published game, has a lot of scenarios in it. Not in full detail, but a lot more. So like here's a spread on if you wanted to do a bank robbery. Description of it, some new rules that are related to it. Is this one of the Drakes? Is this one of the Drakes in chat? Drake and Dice? Oh my goodness. Now I'm nervous. The Drakes are here. Um, Hello. Actually, we were just talking earlier about Blades in the Dark and published modules, and I know that you two have made some stuff like that. And that's interesting, right? Like, I think that's interesting about the idea of a game that's so focused on player-built heists and stuff like that. I'll admit I have not read the stuff that you only 20 of them. Oh, just a few. Just a few. But I think that's so interesting to. Now I kind of want to go look at them just to see what you put in your scenarios. So, like, for my score stuff, I put in a bunch more tables for. Score is filled with tables, and I think ultimately that's what I do, is I like tables, which I think is why Slayers, like, rubs me the wrong way the most, because there's none of that. Nothing like that in Slayers at all. It truly is just follow some sort of three-act structure. Yeah, seriously, the Drakes are a powerhouse. Oh, speaking of, I just have to um Fey Jam just started. I haven't joined it yet, but Hedge is a perfect submission for Fey Jam. You should go find that and submit Hedge to it. Um, yeah, and they're encouraging older stuff that was made before the jam to be submitted. So, just another place to shout out how awesome Hedge is. Here's another reason why I struggle with scenarios, and this is something that I want to talk to people about in chat. When you first started playing, either as a player or as a GM, did you use a pre-made scenario? Did you use um, a pre-made, like a pre-gen module of some kind? Maybe even pre-gen characters themselves. Ty says there's a lot of room for Slayer's table-based hunt. I 100% agree. When Slayer's second edition gets made, that'll be a big part of some changes in Slayers 2. I run one. Okay, yeah. So Alex runs one shots all the time. I'm curious what he does. I love pre-gen one shots. Makes my job easier. That's interesting. Avoid longer modules. So when you first started playing RPGs, what did you do? Because here's what I did. when I first started playing RPGs, I was the GM right away, and uh, I didn't use any modules. And here's why. And I'm wondering if this is informing why I have done it this way. I lived and played initially with Chicago comedy improvisers. So I live in Chicago, and I lived in the city itself for a long time. And my brother is a comedian at Second City. It's like the mecca of comedy in the United States. And all of our friends were Chicago improvisers. So they didn't like anything to be pre-written, right? They made everything up. So I think if I came at them with a pre-gen scenario, they would have just fucked it up anyway, right? They wouldn't have tried. And so I think I got used to this idea of plan nothing. They're going to do whatever they want when you get there. And I think I've absorbed that mentality from those earliest days into everything, into like how I think about the concept of scenarios and everything like that. Um, let's see here. Do you remember the first time I GM'd, I roughly started it out with the default setting, and it rapidly turned into its own thing. Alex was a player at first, but then when I first GM'd, it was 100% homebrew story-wise. You're not too late, Sir Heck. We're talking about our, like, origins, like when we started playing RPGs, and how much scenarios were involved in that process. And I was talking about how so this is the RPGaDay calendar. Apparently this has been going on for 8 years. I've never seen it before, but it seems very cool. And it's just a word. And what I've decided is I'm going to just record myself talking about the word stream of consciousness every day, which will hopefully create a month of sort of videos that represent some semblance of my design philosophy. And it's going to be a lot of ranting and rambling and stuff like that. And we're talking about the word scenario. Unrelated. Okay. So so here's now what I'm thinking about, like all my future stuff is what do I want to make in terms of scenarios? Because I truly don't think I have it in me to write adventures. And this is something that I've been thinking about with Nova, for example. Eddie, the artist for Nova, has a very cool premise for what would probably be like a short campaign of sorts. And I think he came up with this more as something that would have been a novel at first, but sees the capacity of it playing out in a world like Nova. And he pitched it to me, and I was like, that sounds awesome. But I don't think I'd be very good at writing it. And I think there's a great skill in writing scenarios. In writing what I would call good scenarios. I think it's incredibly hard. I think that's why I hired Jeremy to do it for Nova, because it's just not a skill that I have, because it's just not how I play games. But it's a very easy or common way to supplement your games, right? Is to write supplemental material like adventure modules and stuff like that for your games. And I just think ultimately that's not something that I can do. Which is why, like with Corvid Court Aviary, I'm gonna just have other people write Corvid Court stuff, because I'll write the rules and then you all can figure out what everything else looks like. Let's see here. First box that I grabbed came with 3 little adventures with keyed locations, informed my design for the first couple years. Then everything got formulaic, so we threw all that and got weird. Very good. I think making RPGs and writing scenarios are 2 different skill sets for sure. It's just easy to conflate them together. Yeah. Oh, boom. That reminds me. Ty, thank you for saying that. This reminds me of Dice Souls. Gotta talk about Dice Souls. So I should have this downloaded on my computer, and I don't know how to like quickly pull it up. But the quick start. Let me just put this on the screen real quick. Roland says he's terrible at writing scenarios. Steve Jackson has been trying off and on to have me do one for Fantasy Trip, but I keep brain locking. It's part of the whole indie creators are supposed to do everything. Yeah, it is. Umbra, that's 100% part of it is like you have to assume you have to be able to do everything, or that's a huge assumption about how all this works. Um, left that opening for others. I've written a lot of Slayer since that I would have. Yeah, Alex is a machine for writing Slayer stuff. Has some really cool Slayer stuff out there. So we're not gonna read the whole quick start here, but here's what I love about Dice Souls quick start, and I think this is my favorite scenario I've ever seen, ever. It's my favorite quick start I've ever seen. It's my favorite. And here's the thing: is ultimately, do you consider this a scenario? Here's what the quick start of Dice Souls does if you have not seen it. So Dice Souls is Chris Bizzette's Dark Souls inspired game, which is really cool. They've made a game that captures a lot of the essence of like dying again and again, but also getting better at the game when you die, so that like eventually you kind of like auto kill enemies as you move through the world. I can't wait for the full thing to come out. It's going to be very cool. But here's the quick start. And what Chris did is they wrote it as a video game tutorial. So it does not include all of the rules right away, and rules are added in as you learn the game. So you don't, as a quick start, first of all, which is kind of a scenario of sorts, you don't get inundated with all the rules, and you learn them as you need to. But it's clearly a scenario, like it's an area, right? Like it's a specific area, the village square, that's going to be in the game ultimately. Like this, here's where I want to see scenarios. Not after games come out, because I think once people read the game, they'll have a sense of what kind of scenarios that they want to play. Scenarios live in the quick starts. They live in the stuff that comes beforehand. That's the opportunity to show them off. And this is really, I mean, Chris did a fantastic job with this. You learn new stuff each time. Both the GM and the player are learning the game pretty much at the same time in this scenario. Like you're basically going through this area. And look, like you're learning, like you don't need to talk about advancement and upgrades until you hit the point in the scenario in which that would be relevant, right? Like why learn that early? So maybe this is what I think is a good scenario. Maybe this is ultimately what I think is the best type of scenario, which is a video game tutorial. MV is here now. MV, we're talking about scenarios. We're talking about, I guess, what is a scenario? We're talking about this RPGaDay calendar. And we're talking about the word scenario, because that's the first day prompt. Which I guess is like, what is a scenario? What do you think about scenarios? And I'm just doing like stream of consciousness thought about the word scenario. We've got some good words coming up too. Tactics is going to be fun because everybody's talking about tactics. RPG design is older though. Video games do have a long history of level design, don't they? They do have a long history of level design. Yeah. Is like a level in a video game a scenario? I think so, right? So like we should learn about scenario building from video games. I don't really know how much more I have to say about scenarios necessarily. I think what I've learned is that my own interpretation of the necessity of scenarios or anything like that is it stems from my stems from my origins in the scene, which was playing with improvisers who would have said, "I don't care what you've planned anyway, Spencer. We're gonna do it this way." And so I think a lot of my favorite tools that I see out there in terms of the space of scenarios live in the space of tables rather than pre-written stuff. I feel like pre-written stuff gets in the way because I think it teaches bad GM behavior. But again, that's just me through my own experiences. There's awesome scenarios, like the Dice Souls Quick Start. I think that's a good scenario, even though maybe it's not what we would traditionally think of when we think of a scenario. Oh, I have to read things? No way. Envy, you can't give Clover a treat. She's not here, unfortunately. She is with Grandpa right now, having the time of her life. Ty likes how the the Between does it. I haven't read the Between yet. That's Jason Cordova's game, right? Recent release. I have not, but I should. Even if you don't use it, I really appreciate a system including a scenario so that you can see what they intend. The pre-made adventure in Bubblegum Shoe is bad, but it demonstrates structure to write your own. I think that is a good point, Alex. I think that's a really good point of providing some sort of structure of like what a session looks like. I think that's actually more valuable. I think that's more valuable. Having in your book a section that says, here's what a session of this game looks like. Here's what it involves. And then including whatever tools you need for it. Rather than here's another thing that I'm thinking about is I like as you can tell from Lumen like tight gameplay loops. I like loops rather than open sandbox. Sandbox is fun, but I do like loops. That's why Blades interests me so much. And since Blades is all like player driven in terms of the heist and everything, you still don't need scenarios in it. But the premise of the game is laid out so clearly, and it says this is what happens in a session, that the scenario can naturally be created at the table through the players and the GM rather than needing anything pre-written. Because the game clearly says this is what the game is about. And this is the cycle in which that happens. All right, I've missed a lot of chat. Let me see if I can catch up a little bit here. Oh, Ty was talking about the Between. You get a bunch of NPCs, a bunch of locations. Danger, you just use them as tools. I love that. That sounds so good. Mothership modules. I haven't read those either. Can we put Clover snacks on layaway? Yeah, I'll just put like a big pile of them, and then when she comes home later, she'll just be like, "Give me all those. Give them to me now." Carved from. Oh yeah, so that's right. Brindlewood Bay and the Between sort of share a lineage of some sort, right? Section of just like here's how you make stuff. You are the namer. Ty is such a good namer. Ty is a very good namer. As Blades GM, I pretty much no prep for scores. Yeah, I prep nothing in Blades, which is my favorite part about playing Blades, is I don't have to do anything as the GM. I just show up. In fact, they're the ones that are usually prepping because they're talking to each other between sessions about stuff that they want to do. That's the cool stuff. This is what we're doing in this game, and we're all riffing on that idea to keep it fresh. Yeah. I think that's good. So what's the takeaway on scenarios? I think they're fine. That's my takeaway on scenarios. We kind of, for like 25 minutes, talked around the idea that I think they're okay. I think it's such a tricky word to nail down what we mean by scenario because it's 5 out of 10. Because, like, to me, I think this table right here in Seasons is about infinitely more valuable to me than any pre-written scenario that somebody could put in front of me to play Seasons. Scenarios are good, actually. So let it be written, so let it be done. All right, well, there we go. It's done. Scenarios, fine slash good. That's where they land on this on the scale. No, I think it's good. I think that's a good. I just remembered the thing that I actually wanted to talk about with scenarios, because it was what I wanted to work on with Corvid Court slash Seasons right after this. Um, beats, beats, beats. That's all you need. You don't need scenarios. You just need beats. That's all you need. So beats are. I have this handy because I was just talking about this yesterday. Okay, so I've ranted and raved in the past about how much I like the resistance system, and that's a good point, Alex, that Lady Blackbird is an adventure and a game. That's a really good example of scenario and game intertwined, the perfect marriage of the two. Uh, Excellent. So here's Beats. Here's Beats. I don't know why I'm showing you the book. It never works. In Heart, that's how character advancement works. Is you select at the beginning of the session major and minor beats that are interesting to you. These are events or things that you want to have happen. They could be good, they could be bad, they could be clearly mechanical, like take some sort of Fallout. They could be entirely narrative. Like one of the adventure ones is great. It's like have a cocktail or a fighting move named after you. That's so good, right? Yeah, push someone off a roof, they had it coming. And so you choose these at the start, and then you feed them to the GM. And the GM now has, we have now established a bunch of stuff by picking these beats. The scenario can be the loosest, most bare bones skeletal idea in the world, but we've made all the meat with these beats. And now we can just build the whole thing out with these, right? The GM has fuel that they can use. What is that fuel for? It's for player buy-in. The players actually give a shit now, because you have told them, they have told the GM what they want to have happen. And yes, they want it because they want advancement and stuff like that, but like, there's a huge list, so you get to have fun picking from the beats, and like, that's the cool thing here. So you get player buy-in. GM has fuel for figuring out what the session is actually going to look like. It's advancement. Advancement is taken care of. You don't need to do XP or anything else. If the beats happen, cool, you get new stuff. It's so good. I'm sure like there's a bunch of other books that do very similar things or have similar premises out there, and I'm not aware of them. But this is the first I've sort of seen it written out and codified in such a way that it just like unlocked something in my brain where I was like, oh, okay, this is all I want forever from here on out. So we don't need scenarios, we just need beats. That's my new thesis statement. Scenarios, fine. Beats, great. Signed. That's me. That's my design philosophy, day one. Yeah, anything that lets players say this is what I want to do in game is good. It's real good. It's real good. Okay. Speaking of beats, I think we've talked enough about scenarios. It's gonna eventually just get repetitive. Scenarios bad now. We're out. Scenarios are out. Beats are in. Yeah, let's wrap up scenario talk there. I'm gonna take a quick break, refill my drink here, and then I want to come back and I want to talk about beats with two different games, Corvid Court and Seasons. So I will be right back. I just need a couple of minutes. So if you want to stick around and talk about beats, you want to talk about expanded versions of my previous, what you call it, speedrun the month. Let's just do them all. Maps, fuck them. Who needs maps? Tactics, they're out. Weapons, never need them. That's gonna be my mentality for the whole month. That'll be a great great video. Okay, I'm going to take a break. I will be back in just a couple minutes, and then we can talk about Corvid Court and what you call it. Seasons. Be right back.